And welcome back, everybody, to Leading is a Hard Skill. I am Jake Petway, and today I'm going to be walking you through a concept that I've had to explain to many different senior leaders in different tech companies over the years, and that is the difference between waterfall and agile methodologies. Let's get into it. So let me go ahead and say this and get this out of the way. I truly do not believe one methodology is better than the other. I don't believe if you choose agile, you are inherently setting yourself up for success. I do not believe if you choose waterfall, you're inherently setting yourself up for failure, or vice versa. They are tools. They are ways of doing your work, and that really depends on how the culture of your company is formed as to which one is better for the company. Now, whenever I say that, let's look at some of the nuanced reasons why one might be better than the other. In a waterfall scenario, it might be best if you have really tight regulations or really tight budgetary constraints on your project. Whenever you have something like that, planning everything out on the forefront and understanding what it's going to take to develop your system may be a much better end result if you use a waterfall scenario. There may also be very distinct reasons why your team needs to deploy on a regular basis. Maybe you are trying to deal with a large level of bugs in the system. Maybe you're trying to react to customer feedback. Maybe you're trying to stay ahead of competition. Whenever you're doing those things, it probably makes more sense to be in an agile environment. So now let's lay out the basics of what makes waterfall waterfall and what makes agile agile. And I'm going to hit my microphone a few more times just for effect. So with waterfall, what you're doing is you are planning out everything in incredible detail from the absolute jump. You have your requirements from the customer, you have your regulation, you have your things that you need to build out in order to make this project successful. So that looks like building your cards, building out the requirements, doing product discovery, and having the team collaborate on technical feasibility, all at the very outset of the project. From there, you're going to start building the system, but you know how to build the system because you have a complete roadmap that does not and should not change through the entire process. Once you get done building the platform, what you're going to do is you're going to test. And this looks like your QA testing, whether it be manual or automated. If it's automated, QA needs to build out those tests in whatever platform that you're going to use, your Seleniums, Postmans, Protractors, whatever that looks like. Then you are going to go through and do user acceptance testing. User acceptance testing basically means an end user uses the system and tells the stakeholders or project management or whomever it is, this is good, we can go live with it. After you get the green flag there, you move on to production. And that's the lifespan of a waterfall project. Now, of course, that's the lifespan of a waterfall project if everything goes exactly according to plan. And from my experience, that's actually pretty rare that happens. So in some scenarios, you might find technical impediments, like some of the libraries that you planned on using are now deprecated and there isn't a great replacement for them. So now you're going to have to add to the project to build something yourself or find another suitable library or framework or something to get you over that hump. Another situation that pops up more often than not is what I like to call the flying boat dilemma. And what happens here is your customer from the very outset has told you that they need a boat. They give you the list of all the things that the boat needs to do, and you execute on that list exactly. As a matter of fact, you build them something great. You might even build them a yacht versus just a boat, and you go above and beyond. But whenever the customer sees it, they go, man, this boat looks incredible, but I really need it to fly. Really? You need the boat to fly? Okay, let's back up and let's do it again. And that becomes the main issue that predicated agile methodologies. So if that's waterfall, what is agile? Essentially, agile takes all the rules of waterfall, wads them up in a little ball, and... Okay, so I was never actually going to finish that phrase, but if you want to know what it is, go watch The Office. Attention to Stanley, definitely worth the time spent. All jokes aside, Agile is radically different than Waterfall. For instance, in Waterfall, you're only deploying once at the end of the cycle. In Agile, you're deploying over and over and over again in iterations. Essentially, in an Agile environment, once something is ready to go to production, no matter how small the scope, you deploy it. Now, there are some very commonly held misconceptions about when you can deploy, and that deployments are essentially fixed in Agile as well as they are in Waterfall, but that's really not the case. This comes from the notion that you have a 2 to 4 week sprint and that you can only deploy all of your code in one batch at the end of the sprint. But even in the Scrum hand guides put out by scrum.org, they're going to tell you you ship when the increment is ready. That means the increment of code that you are currently working on, if it is ready to go into a production state, it is ready to deploy no matter when it happens in the sprint. So in this case, you have iterations of the software that you are building. So you start off with something small, and then you add on top of that, and then you add on top of that, and then you add on top of that, and you're constantly deploying, you're constantly testing, and you're constantly moving in those small batches so that you can take customer feedback in the middle of those batches, and you can make your decisions and prioritizations based on that customer feedback. So if they get it and say, oh, hey, wait, you guys are building a boat, I really needed an airplane, you can say, no problem, we're not that far into it, and build the airplane as necessary. Now, where Agile starts to have its issues is whenever you do not have a tremendous amount of customer feedback in the middle. So say you are working for a very early stage startup and you don't have customers. You're basically going on the word of the business stakeholder that this is what the customer is going to need. You can possibly get by with some acceptance testing or some user testing in the middle there and find out some different things, but nothing's going to compensate for the lack of real users in the wild telling you what they do and do not like in the system once they're paying for it. On a very real note, the critical lens of a customer gets very different from whenever they're not investing money into using a platform and when they are investing money into using a platform. It's a radically different calculus for the kind of feedback that you get from your end user. However, if you do have those end users in the system and they are using it and giving you constant feedback, they're reporting bugs, and they're telling you what they do and don't like, that feedback loop works really well. And thus, why being able to deploy to a production state all the time makes an absolute massive difference. It's a totally different psychological effect for an end user if they report a bug and within a day or two, it's resolved and they get note of that. It also allows you to stay ahead of some of your competition. The danger of that comes in with your testing. You're doing testing in a smaller batch, your system is still growing and growing and growing. So it's really an onus on the QA team and frankly the rest of the company to make sure that they constantly have a solid eye on the quality of the product. If you ever forsake testing, whether it be unit testing, integration testing, end-to-end testing, or your regression testing, then you're going to have issues later on whenever you back up and find out all these bugs are getting into the system through regression that you had no idea about. And if your company is regulated by any kind of governing body or have any kind of strict user criteria, that becomes a major issue. And that's where Agile starts to go off the rails a little. So now we're about 9 minutes into this video, and you're probably going, but Jake, these are all the things that I already knew about Agile and Waterfall. How do I take that and explain it to a senior leader that has no idea what I'm talking about? All they've seen are the buzzwords online. I got you. Promise. So what you're going to do is compare Waterfall to catering and Agile to a sit-down restaurant. Trust me on this. Now, this is why. Whenever you get catering, you're sending one massive order into a company. They take that order, they make sure you don't have any special needs, any food allergies, any distastes, and they compile the entire order and bring it to you. And for some people in some groups, it's going to make a lot of sense to get catering instead of going to a restaurant. In these cases, you might have a very tight time box that you have to fit meetings into. You have a very tight budget that you are allotted. So what does that mean? It means you don't want to introduce variable cost of a menu. It means you don't want to take up additional time, say if there's a traffic jam or the restaurant that you want to go to is very busy. This way, you give an order to somebody, they bring it all to you, and everything is put in your stomach or a production state at the same time. So now Agile is like your sit-down restaurant. The restaurant doesn't know who's going to come through the door. The restaurant doesn't know who's going to order what or what kind of needs anybody is going to have. So you can make best guesses on that based off trends and different analytics, but ultimately you're really not sure. So you have to be highly adaptable to the things that walk through the front door. Just like in Agile, whenever end users are giving their feedback, the patrons of the restaurant are also giving their feedback in real time. So if somebody's order is messed up or somebody actually has an allergy to something that's on their plate and that needs to be discarded, then the restaurant has to be able to adapt and respond quickly. You can't stop the entire service just because one plate was bad. So they go back, they fix that plate, ship it back, sending it to production, and then keep rolling on the rest of the priorities or the rest of the dishes that are going out into the dining room. That's essentially how Agile works. If there's an issue, you're going to fix it, you're going to adapt, reprioritize, and then go back to what you had normally planned. And that's how you would explain the difference between Waterfall and Agile to your senior leaders in around 2 minutes. Thank you so very much for making it through another video. If you like what I'm doing, please give me a follow, a like, a subscribe, a comment, whatever it might be on whatever platform you're watching this on. And as always, thank you so very much, and I will see you next time.